They see student voice as learning and culture, which they actually are starting to perceive as more important, because it's to everybody, and there's no one person voicing the opinion. It's valid to every single student, and anyone, especially students that would have been marginalised in the past, like we said, the students with like additional needs, who are stepping forward now to say, this is what I need to learn, and this is how I demonstrate my learning. So those are the small actions that are starting. And because it's still a pilot scheme, it hasn't reached the whole school level yet, but we have a plan with that group on how do we formulate it. We did a workshop. I was on an Erasmus with Bridge 21 called Teaching for Tomorrow. And I was working with 3 other teachers here, and we were working with schools from Estonia, Sweden, and Germany. So they came here, and we were allowed to use the Bridge 21 model, which is based on our cooperative learning and 21st century learning, to do a workshop to demonstrate those techniques to the other schools from other countries. And I chose to work with the student voice team even rather than our team, because I thought it'd be something completely different for them. And we used a more formal structure, whereas before it had always been the informal focus group. This time we implemented a cooperative learning lesson scheme. So every student had a specific role that day that they knew about in advance, and they were prepared to introduce new people to this. And that was done because they want to find a way to introduce it to the school next year. And because we can't be in every room, but they want it in every room, they've started to consider, with myself, a structure that anybody can pick up and implement that day, and student voice will happen. So that's their actions at the moment. Another action that the students performed was the teachers, 22 of them volunteered to stay back in an evening to actually try and promote the awareness. The students wanted to promote the awareness of student voice outside of our forums with the NCCA and outside of our discussions. So 22 teachers stayed back, and technically they role played as students. So our students were leading the workshops, and the teachers had to discuss their attitudes towards assessment. The teachers sitting down and having those conversations actually meant the students were much more confident in future with the student voice, because they found that a lot of the stuff that the teaching staff were saying was the exact same as what the students would have said. They were coming from very similar points of view, very similar backgrounds, very similar ideas. We're still learners. As teachers, we're learners. I learn more every day, and I try to reflect on my learning, and that affects my teaching. My day-to-day teaching is changing from watching the conversations that my students are having, even with each other. So I've brought a lot more things in now, so a lot more cooperative learning, a lot more 21st century teaching technologies. I have a feature group at the moment that are building websites about art history instead of writing essays, because they're digital natives. They want to use their iPhones. Instead of telling them phones can't be used in an art room, let's actually use them as tools. And it isn't just substitution for a book. You're looking at the SAMR model. It's about redefinition of the task, about using the technology to actually redefine it in a new way that couldn't have been done previously. So they're building resources and sharing them with their friends. So again, it's an assessment for their learning, in the fact that they all have a resource now that can be shared among the entire class. And again, that's all coming from student voice, and a lot of it's coming from those conversations with those teachers to see how everyone was in the same level playing field. There was no autocratic element in the room at all. It was a very even playing field. Everyone was in the same boat. Next year, the idea is to, my real hope is to do everything in small steps, because then we can cement it and we can make sure it's effective and have it actually just as part of the school culture. Well, at the moment, for any sort of feedback, is always through the pilot team. And we meet regularly enough. It's at least once every 2 to 3 weeks we meet and just discuss things. And before any other workshop, we feed off how the previous workshop had been. So we reflect on that, and then we start building towards the next workshop. So I'm actually next week having a feedback loop on the Teaching for Tomorrow workshop that we did with the previous teachers, because I want to find what the students feel was the open-ended focus group conversation or the cooperative learning form more successful for them, and to find a happy medium that can then be brought into the other classrooms next year. So it's constantly checking back. They have, at this stage, they call their own meetings as well. They have a Facebook or chat group. So when I said, are we going to move on to another talk, they arrange their own meetings and then they call me too. So it's developed to that point now. We also have an Edmodo group where we communicate on, so it's Web 2.0, and it's a social learning platform. So I'm the moderator, and that's I'm in control of every piece of information that's on it. But the students put up their ideas, we have surveys on it. And I think student voice is important to every student to know that there is a way for them to work. I mean, I'm the LCA coordinator here, so obviously working with students who will be at risk of early school leaving and trying to find a way to motivate them to look for apprenticeships, even to look at PLC courses, to know that they can go on to university if there's other ways, you know. And I think student voice, getting students to examine their own learning, to find the right way to communicate with teachers, to make the best out of the actual education process is very, very important. Because the one thing, like, we're told when you're training that you're not the student's friend. You're told you're not their friend, don't be their friend. And you're absolutely right, that's good practice, you're not. But that doesn't mean you don't have to care. I think the communication with a student can show that you care means the world to them. The student that was thinking about leaving school knows that the teacher cares and the subject is beneficial to them, they're going to keep coming to school. And that opens up the opportunities, and that's where you can say that it feeds into college for every student, because they're aware that education is important to them, they're aware that it opens opportunities, and they're aware that they can make their condition better. I think that's very, very important.
There's like a survey. I know we're having a meeting, I think it's next week, and there's going to be just, you know, because at the end of the year, obviously, we're going to have a wrap-up survey, just, you know, how did you feel about it? Like, do you feel like you're progressing? Like, I remember before we were giving the workshop for the first years, there was, you know, just a little, I think it was a little, not a test, but just like a survey, like, oh, how do you feel? Like, do you feel confident about doing this? Like, do you feel you have the skills to do this? And then afterwards, like, do you feel like you've gained any skills from doing it? Because we were essentially doing Mr. Burns' role, which is facilitating like that group. So
we kind of assessed ourselves as best we could when talking about assessment, funnily enough, and we normally had sheets afterwards that say, oh, what did you guys discuss, and a lot of different ways and trying to figure out what we actually discussed and talked about. And our teacher would constantly ask us, whether it's in the student voice meetings itself, whether it's in his art class, or when it's just generally down the corridor, how we felt about how everything was going. And after we did big events with the student voice, like the National Forum and just around Easter time, he asked us how we felt about it and asked us afterwards how we felt. And I think that it was really important for him to do that for us. So we felt that if we didn't like something, we could change it, and if we did like something, we could do more of it. So a lot of the time he did come back to us and talk to us, and we assessed it as best we could, really. And I think it was a really beneficial thing to do for us all, so we knew what to do and what not to do next year, hopefully.
And now we've done that workshop with the first years, and most of the sixth years kind of already know what it's about, because it was in the school last year, and they're kind of a little more open to it.
They were involved in focus groups as well, weren't they, for different subjects?
By the end of it, we want, like, definitely at least the senior years all to be trained in, just like the 20 of us, all of them to know exactly what student voice is, and, you know, how to encourage others to kind of open up to their teachers. And then we can get those sixth years and those other fifth years that aren't doing it, and the other TYs, and they can go talk to the younger years as well. So we can have workshops where the sixth years talk to the first years, or maybe the fifth years talk to the second years, where all the students basically, and in the end, all know what they're talking about when it comes to student voice, and all are comfortable with their teachers, and everyone's, you know, all teachers and students are all down on the same level.
And it's to have open communication between the staff and the students more than we have now, and a lot more than we did previous. I don't think you can really ever communicate too much. It's always something that can be improved and tweaked slightly to make it better for everyone.